Hello, and welcome to this updated video guide for completing the Praetorium in Final Fantasy Heavensward. My name is TSDS, and in this video you'll learn everything there is to know about doing the Praetorium now that it's no longer current content. The Praetorium is the second of two 8-man dungeon encounters in the level 50 story questline of A Realm Reborn. When I first did this dungeon, I looked at a lot of guides in order to do it correctly, but all of them are now out of date. This video will show you what a real run looks like these days and inform you of what you need and don't need to look out for. As so much of this dungeon affects all class roles, this video will guide every role instead of having individual video guides. There are an awful lot of cutscenes in this dungeon, around 30 minutes worth, so I advise tanks and healers to skip them, and DPS, whose maximum damage isn't required here anymore, to choose whether or not they want to see the dungeon or the cutscenes on your first run. You really won't see both, so fair warning. At the start, your tanks will pull this small group of trash here and interact with this Magitek terminal, teleporting them further into the dungeon. Just run past the trash and interact with it to teleport yourself. Note that the mobs will bug, causing anyone who attacked them to stay in combat for a good while. However, this doesn't actually matter outside of spells that require you to be out of combat to cast. In the next area, you'll find another terminal and a bunch of mobs. Here, the tanks will group them all up and your group will kill them. One of the mobs drops a key that you'll use on the terminal to unlock the door. This next area is rather interesting. For DPS and healers, just follow your tanks. At the end will be another terminal that you'll interact with just like you did with the first one. For tanks, this part can suck a bit due to something you'll see at the end. If you want to be a sneaky beaver, move through the door a little slowly and your other tank might take the lead here, giving you a free ride, but you didn't hear this from me. Lead your way through the opening you just saw me go through and pull all the mobs as you go. Keep going and eventually you'll find another opening to the left. Head in here and the floor nearby will collapse, giving you a nice way down. Keep going and you'll find a final group of mobs just in front of the teleportation terminal. What sucks here is that taking any hit will interrupt your ability to use the terminal. As you have so many mobs down here, it can get pretty easy to die. If you have any AoE stuns, like the White Mage's Holy Spell, you can try and help out your tank by giving them some time to teleport. If you do die, just respawn and interact with the shortcut you see me doing. Number 0 on your keyboard's number pad is by default a hotkey to accepting those pop-up windows, so this could make it easier. I've just never remembered to use it, so I usually die like the heroic scrub that I am. Once you teleport through, you'll find a small group of trash next to another terminal. Kill the mobs here and pick up the key one of them drops. Use it on the terminal and you'll unlock the door to the Praetorium's first boss. The first boss, Mark II Magitek Colossus, is a cakewalk. For tanks, just turn him around and press some of your buttons. DPS and healers can pretty much just nuke the boss. There really isn't anything to watch out for here. When the boss is down, get on this lift and interact with the terminal once your whole group is on it. This extremely unimportant next part will go one of two ways. You'll either sneak around these monsters avoiding the big Colossus, or your tank will go ham and pull it. Either way, just move into the next room, kill the trash, grab the key, unlock the door and head on through. This next bit is very important. Interact with the identification key reader in order to allow yourself to have some fun. Turn around and you'll find another lift. Get on it and ride it to the top. Once you're at the top, you'll find an old friend. Interact with it and the fun begins. If you didn't use the key reader below, you can't continue on this next bit, so make sure you don't forget. Here, you'll get to control your own suit of Magitek Armor. Yay! You'll have two buttons on your action bar. Number 1 allows you to select an area to obliterate, and number 2 will make you look like someone who doesn't understand what number 1 does. Follow the group and blow things up. If by some unthinkable act you lose your mount, there will be spares along the way, but one mount is enough to do this area pretty quickly. Keep blowing things up and eventually you'll reach a familiar place. Kill the Magitek Colossus if it's not already dead and will likely pull soon, and then turn your cannon towards the Serment barrier. Give it a few hits and it'll go down. Head on through and walk over the mystical glittering shiny to teleport to the next area. Here you've got more of the same. It's hard to get lost, so just keep going. Eventually, you'll come to parts where Proto-Ultima arm units burst through the wall to block your path. They can deal pretty decent damage and knock you quite far back, so just stay at range and give them a bit of the old Magitek handshake. That means blow them up. At the end, you'll find one more Serment barrier. Destroy it and you'll get to the Praetorium's second boss. The second boss, Nero Tol Scava, is also pretty easy. Shortly after the fight starts, the outer parts of the room fill with AoE. It doesn't do any real damage anymore, but stay out of it all the same. For tanking, just turn him away from the group. The boss will also often knock you back, so do your best to avoid dragging the boss into the AoE. This can be pretty tricky, but ultimately isn't something to stress over. For DPS and healers, you can pretty much just nuke the boss again. The only other mechanic to look out for is the Magitek Claws that spawn periodically throughout the fight. They target one group member and create a very obvious purple link between Claw and Claw E? Anyway, if the Magitek Claw reaches their target, they knock them very far back, likely into the AoE, and select another target. They have very tiny amounts of HP though, so just give them a little bonk if you see them pop up. Job done. After the boss, run through to the next area and interact with yet another Magitek terminal. This one will teleport all nearby players to the third boss encounter. If you're too far away to get teleported, a shortcut will appear just nearby, so interact with that instead. The third boss is the big cheese himself, Gaius Van Balasar, and he's also depressingly easy. For tanks, just keep him where he is, and for everyone else, just go ham. Eventually, Gaius will deploy a blue AoE zone around him that you would normally move out of, but ain't nobody got time for that. Just keep nuking. There are two mechanics he may do, but you'll likely not see or notice them. The first is that he'll teleport to a random player after having his AoE down for a little while. You probably won't see this though, as he drops faster than Aereo Hota with a butter knife in his back. The second is that he'll create this blue X-shaped slash projectile that will fly straight towards a random player. This is very easy to dodge, but sometimes quite hard to spot. Saying that though, it doesn't do much damage, and your healers haven't done jack so far anyway, so give him some work. Once the fight is done, head towards this door and interact with it to teleport your group again. You've now got to face the fourth boss of the Praetorium, the Ultima Weapon. At the start of the fight, Ultima Weapon takes effectively 0 damage. As a tank, you can try and position him on the pool, but there's always at least 6 people who will blow their load straight away and take the boss's attention. Just wait for the screen to glow all white, as that's your cue that the boss is now taking normal damage. Once this happens, pick the boss up and turn him away from the group. Once the fight is underway, there are various mechanics to watch out for, so we break them down one by one. In the beginning, Ultima will cast green hand lasers from his hand lasers, usually in sets of 3. These are hugely telegraphed though, so just move out of them. Ultima Weapon also has access to various Primal based attacks. The first is an AoE blast attack from Garuda on the outer edges of the room. To avoid this, you must move to the centre area before the hit lands. Note though that as soon as Garuda attacks, Titan will do his Titan Smash, affecting the centre of the room. You'll usually get hit by at least one of these, but the damage isn't all that. Once enough damage is dealt, Garuda will jog on, and you needn't worry about her attack again. The second attack comes in the form of explodey plume things, first in a ring around the room by Ifrit, and then a bunch in the centre from Titan. Just dance in and out to avoid them. This attack can also be reversed with plumes in the middle followed by plumes around the edges. Eventually, Titan bites the big one and his attacks vanish. The third attack is Fritz Eruption. This targets a random ranged character and puts an AoE explosion under them for a number of times. Just move away from the AoE and move away from your group so you don't throw needless damage on your team. One other attack he does is a sizable AoE explosion centered on himself. This isn't telegraphed and the attack has a high knockback, but it isn't major damage, so Melee should just run back to the boss afterwards. Before long, the boss's first phase will be over and his second begins. For tanks, just grab him where he is and turn him away from your group. In terms of attacks in this phase, he keeps his green hand lasers and his knockback explosion, but loses all of his primal based attacks. During the fight, many Magitek bit ads will spawn around the edges and plink away at your team with annoying little lasers. The lasers don't do much damage and are easily healed through, but might annoy the good raider inside you who likes to avoid telegraphs. Just kill a few now and then to control their numbers, otherwise it gets very spammy. Another attack Ultima gains in this phase is a Theroplasm. He will target a random player and shortly afterwards a green orb will move out towards them. If the orb reaches the player, it'll explode, dealing around 1000 damage. With all the bit lasers shooting around, it can be hard to spot, but the damage isn't really that much. The final attack to watch out for is the only thing here that can cause you serious damage, and so it's best to avoid. A giant spaceship will start a collision course with the boss room, which is telegraphed by a large expanding impact zone. The pulses emitting from the impact zone are coloured to reflect the amount of damage you're going to take. For this, it's best just to run as far away from the impact zone as possible and you'll be alright. For tanks, if you're tanking the boss directly behind where he spawns, the second of these spaceships will target the floor directly under your feet. While you can likely survive this, maybe not even needing to pop a cooldown, it's best to simply move the boss to your left. The left is important here as the third spaceship will crash to your right. These directions are from being behind the boss's spawn location and looking towards the room. At around 5%, Ultima Weapon teleports to the centre of the room and begins casting Ultima. I would say don't let him get this cast off, but let's be real, he's a goner. After another cutscene, you'll be moved back and ready to face the final boss, La Habrea. I would say boss, but this dungeon is over. La Habrea is basically just a very simple tank and spank encounter. When tanking, he can knock you back a good distance, but whoop-de-doo. For healers and ranged, La Habrea will put decently sized purpley black AoE circles on the floor. Standing in one of these causes it to explode, dealing a bit of damage, so avoid doing so, but it's not the end of the world if you eat one of these. After half a biscuit, he'll be down. Well done. Hopefully, this guide will help any of you new players who are looking to do this dungeon so you won't be as worried or unsure as I was on my first time. If you enjoyed the guide, then let me know, and if there are any other encounters or perspectives you would like to see, then check out my channel or feel free to ask me to create one. The cutscenes for this dungeon can be found in your room and inn, but you can also find them on my channel. For tanks and healers, I really recommend skipping them here, but for DPS, you can choose. Just remember that watching the cutscenes will mean you'll literally miss the whole dungeon. Thank you for watching, and good luck.